Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Sumaya Ahmed Sheikh. I am the Michigan advisor for Emgage. We're just going to get started here in a couple of minutes. And we're just going to give a couple minutes for people to log on. Thank you for joining. Assalamu alaikum for those who are joining. Hello. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Sumaya Ahmed Sheikh. I am the Emgage Michigan Senior Advisor. We are just going to get started here in just a couple of minutes, and we're going to dive right into the conversation. So if you can just please wait a couple minutes here. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We're just going to give it one more minute and get started at 8:06. Thank you for joining. Assalamu alaikum and hello, everyone. My name is Sumaya Ahmed Sheikh. I am the Michigan advisor for Emgage Michigan. Thank you for joining us today, this evening. We really appreciate your time. We know we've gotten a lot of questions, concerns about the ongoing unprecedented raids that have been happening to students in our community. And we really wanted to address the community and have an open conversation about next steps and how we can help. Just to give us a little background about Emgage for those who are new here on the call, Emgage here in Michigan, as well as it's a national organization, and we work to educate and mobilize Muslim American voters in support of policies that enable our communities to thrive and democracy to flourish. So once again, thank you for joining us here today. We wanted to use this as an emergency town hall, so we're going to dive right into the conversation. I wanted to welcome two of our guests and respected leaders here in the community that really have jumped on to support our communities in many different ways. Today we have Loren Khogali. She joined the ACLU as the Michigan Executive Director in 2021. Her deep ties to civil rights and civil rights organizations began way earlier, so she's been in this work for a while. We appreciate you. Thank you, Loren, for being a partner of ours and for really working to strengthen our communities. We also have Shereef Akeel, who many of you know. He's one of the nation's most respected civil rights lawyers as well, and employment attorneys. He was recognized among the Forbes top 200 lawyers, and he's just has done phenomenal work and has really stepped up to ensure that our communities are safe and productive. And I'm going to pass it over first to Loren.
Thanks so much, Sumaya, and thank you everyone for having me this evening and for being here. I just want to acknowledge, I know that tensions are running incredibly high, and I hope that I can share some facts and some resources that are helpful for everyone this evening. Yesterday, as was the case for many of you, I imagine, we received notice that law enforcement were executing search warrants at residents in multiple communities, including Canton, Ann Arbor, and Ypsilanti. There was a lot of information circulating, as happens when something scary happens, and there have been a number of media reports. I will just note that this afternoon, some clarity came through a notice from the Attorney General's office that provided just some information. And just for purposes of sort of sharing what was there, it indicated that there were search warrants that were authorized by the 45th District Court and executed by multiple law enforcement agencies. And while it does not specify the agencies, I think it's fair to say it was a combination of federal, state, and local law enforcement. And that those search warrants were executed at 5 residential locations in Ann Arbor, Canton, and Ypsilanti. And the notice indicated that the warrants were executed as part of an investigation by the state attorney general's office into alleged vandalism and property damages that had happened in multiple counties in Southeast Michigan. And then it goes on to list 12 incidents that span about February 2024 through March 2025, excuse me, in different jurisdictions. And if it's helpful, if for those of you who haven't seen the notice, I'm happy to drop it in the chat. I do want to just pause for a moment to talk about procedure here. Uh, Law enforcement cannot just show up at your home and demand entry without a search warrant that is signed by a judge, and that's really important for you to know. Similarly, I would say immigration enforcement can't show up at your house and demand entry to your home without a warrant that is signed by a judge. Sometimes immigration enforcement shows up with what are called administrative warrants. Um, and in order to obtain a search warrant in a criminal case, law enforcement has to submit a request for that warrant to a prosecutor. That prosecutor in turn asks the court to issue a search warrant. And the judge can only sign a search warrant after making a determination that there is probable cause to believe that evidence of a crime will be found in the place to be searched as indicated in the search warrant. Now, just to be clear, search warrants can be challenged in court as part of a criminal case. I spent 13 years as a public defender in the federal system, and I challenged search warrants all the time. And so just for instance, if someone were charged with a crime based on evidence found during the execution of a search warrant, an attorney could file a motion to challenge that warrant. And there are a number of grounds on which a warrant can be challenged. I won't get into the nuances of that. But if successful, essentially what happens is that the evidence seized pursuant to the warrant could be excluded from being used to prove the case against the person charged. And so I wanted to detour there for a second because I don't know how much people understand about search warrants, and just to make sure that folks have at least basic, accurate information about sort of criminal process. Um, Look, in the last 3 months, I know that collectively we, and this community in particular, has been inundated with executive orders from the president that have directed ICE and CBP and DHS to take steps that have resulted in non-citizens being taken from their workplaces, from their homes, literally off the streets and detained and deported, targeting by the federal government of citizens and non-citizens because of their speech in support of Palestine, the sudden revocation of student immigrant status for hundreds of students across the country, and continued terrorization of many communities of citizens and non-citizens who are being detained at the northern border. And I could go on. I think at this point, the ACLU nationwide has filed over 40 cases challenging the executive orders and other policies by this administration. And so it is absolutely unsurprising that the sudden and unexplained presence of law enforcement in multiple communities yesterday, especially early in the morning, executing search warrants at residences, using battering rams to enter homes. Understandably, that adds to an already excruciating level of fear and chaos. Um, I think it's really important, however, to note that the search warrants that were executed yesterday appear to be directly related to a criminal investigation by the Office of the Attorney General of the state of Michigan. And I think it's fair to assume that these are not part of a broad raid or a mass sweep by law enforcement or immigration. Um, I am not going to go on for a long time tonight, but I do, before I hand this back over to Sumaya, I do just want to share some resources. As you might imagine, us, along with many of our partners, have been doing Know Your Rights trainings on a variety of issues over the last several months to many, many, many groups of people. Um, and so we have resources both produced by our office in Michigan as well as the ACLU nationwide that span a broad variety of Know Your Rights topics. And so when we think about like how you keep yourself safe, whether you are a citizen or a non-citizen, whether you are a person engaging in protests around the many things that you might be protesting, whether you have children or friends have children in schools who are not citizens, whether you are thinking about traveling internationally and you are concerned about what rights you have when you are in the airport. I will share a bunch of links to those materials here. And I'll drop several of them in the chat. They can all be found at our website or at our national organization's website. And then one thing I just want to note, in these materials, you're going to find a couple things. You'll find several Know Your Rights materials. You'll see a letter that the ACLU authored with our partners at the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center that was sent to every school in the district, specifically with respect to the rights of immigrant children in public schools. And then you'll see a Know Your Rights that I just want to draw your attention to, which is called their Know Your Rights with respect to a border state. And I think we talk a lot about border states in the South, but Michigan is a border state. Just a couple weeks ago, of course, our colleague and fellow lawyer, Amir Maklad, was stopped and detained in the airport, returning from an international trip with his family. And did exactly the right thing, which was to not allow himself to be searched. But I just, I think it's important to know that Michigan, because of a policy that CBP holds in place, which says that any area within 100 miles of a border is considered a border zone. So that's a place where CBP, and when I say CBP, I mean Customs and Border Patrol can stop people. And so it's really important that you understand, particularly for people who may not be citizens, what your rights are within that 100-mile zone. And so I just want to make sure that's sort of a Michigan specific Know Your Rights that I want to make sure folks are aware of. And with that, Sumaya, I'll hand it back over to you. And I'm happy to take any questions after Attorney Akeel speaks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that breakdown. I know we have, Emgage Michigan waited a little bit to respond to the community fully after consulting with several of our partner organizations, like the ACLU, to ensure that we were very thorough in our response and we didn't risk anyone's safety, and wanted to ensure that we were updating accurately. So I appreciate your support and kind of setting the tone of where we're at right now. And where we go from here. And on that note, I'd love to pass it over to Attorney Shereef to kind of give the community some insight of where we go from here. What, has there been examples of things that have happened like this, and how can students, parents, communities, houses of worship stay safe and be prepared during times like these?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sumaya. Thank you, Emgage. Thank you, Nada, for sponsoring this event. It's very thoughtful and it's very timely. And it's an honor to also be able to be on the panel with Loren to be able to discuss this very important topic. To me, I've been practicing 28 years. This is, to me, round two, the way I look at it. September 11 was round one for us. And I want to kind of step back and give you an overriding perspective. There is some good news here, even despite we're having this emergency meeting, is that the community in general has evolved so much since September 11. And we are much more prepared as a whole. And I'm talking the overall civil rights community. Many organizations have developed since then with ISPU and Emgage and CARE and other organizations flourished more and have become more educated. The community has become more educated. There's been a lot of lessons learned and a lot of battles since September 11, from charities being frozen, from people being listed on a no-fly list. And we've had to deal with these challenges to overcome them. This is round 2, but it's a little more of a concern to me, because it does attack the heart of our First Amendment. And I'm just talking contextually wise. And that's the rights of all Americans. I mean, the founding fathers came here, the first thing they passed was the First Amendment, because they wanted, that's such a sacred right. The optics here look horrible. Obviously, the timing here with these raids, put it into context with what's going on nationally, and especially the targeting of students who were just exercising their freedom of speech to protest. The context and the timing does raise eyebrows. I'm hopeful if the search warrant, I mean, there is a distinction between a criminal act, like such as vandalism, obviously, and freedom of speech. So that remains to be seen as far as what those charges were really, if that's just a sugarcoating, so to speak, or is that just, they're masquerading it as a crime, as a vandalism, but really it is targeting students that were activists or involved. Because this raises another concern, and that really it raises two issues, and I want the community to be mindful of, is, are they treating people different that are similarly situated? So if one was a pro-Palestinian activist or an anti-genocide, whatever you want to say it, and the other person was a pro-Israeli activist, which is fine, and you have the right, that's a freedom of speech, and they both engage in the same act, is one being targeted in comparison to the other? And that would trigger the Equal Protection Clause. That's just something to just be mindful of, is, are a certain group or a certain segment being targeted more in comparison to another segment who are engaging in similar behavior? And so that raises some questions. And again, that remains to be seen. Another concern that's, I think, more that we all really have to be conscious about, and that is the chilling effect. Students were, they're righteously indignant. The students today are, I'm very optimistic about the future, because 30 years ago, students in college, the main concern was Wall Street, how much I can make money. Today, the students and the young, they're more concerned about the environment and humanity, and they're really conscious. They're becoming the moral conscious and the strengthening the moral fabric of our country. And it's these students who sacrificed everything to really stand up for something that's greater than who they are, sacrificed their career, sacrificed their names, standing up for something that they really believe in. And those are going to be the future leaders, and that's a good thing, because when you're principled and you're fighting for the right reason, or your actions are dictated by a strong moral premise, that's good for everybody. The concern now is the chilling effect. Are these raids and these actions that are being done, are they specifically designed to cause a chilling effect, to really take the wings off these young students and discourage them from moving forward with what they believe in is right? So, so there's good as far as our society. I mean, as far as the community in general has become more prepared, and having these webinars today, that was not existent back in September 11. Back in September 11, when FBI came, we would invite the FBI agents in, give them baklava, and ask them and talk to them. Today, no way. You have a search warrant? Let me read it. The community has been educated, so that's what I'm saying. There's been a lot of progress as far as where we were and where we are now. but we have to now be concerned about how we're moving forward. And that's really concerning the younger generation. And we have to protect them and make sure that their rights, their First Amendment rights are guarded.
Thank you, Shereef. We have a lot of great questions in the chat box that I think are really gonna guide the conversation and help give our community members some feedback on how, where they go from here. I'll start off with something that I think a lot of parents and students have been thinking about. The raids have prompted widespread concern about the safety and rights of students involved in activism. So for both of you, what is some advice that you can give to students or other folks involved in protests or activism when things like this are happening?
Well, thank you, Loren. Number one, recognize, first of all, you have that First Amendment right to speak, to exercise and to voice your opinion. I mean, the Supreme Court, I'm not saying to do that, but the Supreme Court has held that so sacred that even burning the American flag was considered freedom of was a right, a protected right. But I'm not saying to do any of that, but it's just giving you the idea of someone expressing their opinion. But as far as a major thing to keep in mind for especially young students is recognizing the difference between a crime and exercising your First Amendment. This is where the line gets crossed. If you're protesting in an area that's impermissible, if you're in a building, you break into a building to voice your opinion, exercising your speech, the crime overrides the freedom of speech right here. So that's important to know. So if there is a permit or if there's a place that is a public place where it's permissible to protest, you can protest as much as you want all day. That's a cherished right. That's an American right. And that's what makes us stand out from any other country in the world. And if that goes, we have then all the vision of founding fathers would have been torpedoed and they'd be rolling in their graves if we don't hold that sacred.
Thank you. We have a question here for the ACLU, and I appreciate you, Loren, for answering, but I'm going to ask some of the ones that you answered in the text out loud too, so people can see that or hear that. With the search warrant, so they knock first or start breaking doors, do any of the raids have an unsigned order, and do they always have to show a warrant? And why are these folks being treated like criminals? It seems like an overreach.
Yeah, so a couple things that I'll just offer here. Some of these questions I actually don't have the information to answer, so I just want to acknowledge that. In Michigan, generally speaking, we have what are both called no-knock warrants and knock and announce warrants. No-knock warrants can only be issued under specific circumstances that a judge has to authorize in signing the warrant, and that would be special circumstances like the expectation that both the people in the place where the warrant was being executed and the officers executing the warrant might face increased danger if they knocked and announced before they came in. Most of the time, what are used are called knock and announce warrants, which means that a police officer is required, whatever law enforcement agent is required, to knock on the door and announce themselves that they are there to execute a search warrant. If a person refuses, generally what happens then is the person admits them. What will happen is often people can be detained during the execution of the search warrant. So it's a temporary detention where they're often asked to stand some particular place in the house and stay there while the search warrant is executed. Officers, in order to enter a home, do always have to have a warrant that is signed by a judge, and they should leave behind, though sometimes this happens, sometimes it doesn't, they should leave behind essentially both a copy of the warrant as well as a copy of anything that they took from the residence when they left. So sort of a receipt.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I should say, I don't know the answer to the question about what type of warrant was used in these cases.
Thank you for that. And on that same note of students, Shereef, do students have any legal recourse if they believe their rights were infringed during these raids?
Students' rights do not stop at the college campus. It's a well-known ruling. If it depends on the facts and the circumstances. Obviously, if a crime was committed, we got to view this from a different lens. But if the raid is being pursued, again, time remains to be seen. We don't know all the facts yet, but if it's induced due to student activism and protesting, that's really of concern, and they would have a possible 1983 action, a First Amendment retaliation action, and the First Amendment right to be able to pursue. So there could be also what's called a Bivens action. So the facts again are still not clear, but when the dust settles, we're going to have an idea what rights they may have.
Okay. And I'll put this one out there, and whoever feels comfortable to take a stab at it. How do we balance freedom of speech around Palestine with folks trying to criminalize and weaponize the definition of anti-Semitism? If crime outweighs freedom of speech, how do we fight their attempts to consider our freedom of speech a crime under their redefinition?
I mean, so I will just start by saying the right to engage in speech is a fundamental First Amendment right, as you just heard Shereef say. I think what we have when people are engaged in protest, and that right is largely absolute, right? You have a First Amendment right to engage in speech. And people cannot be targeted because of the speech they engage in, even if that speech makes other people uncomfortable or feels harmful to them. When people are engaged in protest, as Shereef just explained, there is a line that can be crossed into one of the reasons I saw a question here, can I back up for just 1 second? One of the things that I think is really important when you go out to protest, it's really important to know what your rights are when you're entering a protest. Because the police, if they come, right, can engage, they can disperse protesters, they can take certain actions. You should know where you can protest, right, so that you're well equipped if the police approach you, you understand what your rights are. What you can't do is protest in places sort of on private property. You can't, and so like when you start to do your protest crosses over into places that could be charged as a criminal offense, that is in fact sort of, that's sort of the line that gets crossed. But your right to speak, no matter when you are speaking, when you're speaking out, particularly political speech, is sort of the most is the place that that is most constitutionally protected. You have a right to speak even when things feel harmful to other people or when things make other people uncomfortable.
Yeah, I also like to add to this, because we in America, there's a system of checks and balances. Because a law is passed, it does not mean it's constitutional. So if a law is passed saying from now on, if you say donuts, this is going to be viewed as hate speech, that's going to be challenged someday, because when you regulate content, once you start regulating content, what is being said. This is, it triggers scrutiny, and the courts will have to look at that very carefully. So because you hear a law being passed saying, if you say that word, that's hate speech or whatever, that does not mean it's constitutional, because it still has to get reviewed by a court. And when a government can regulate time and manner, for example, XXX movies or whatever, can't be, that's again free speech, that's free speech. But it can't be, these movies can't be by, for example, a schoolyard. It has to be somewhere else. So courts can place a limit. I mean, Congress can place a limit and a manner where you can speak, where you can voice your, whatever you disagree with, whatever, it could be so abhorrent. But there is room for those people, whoever expressing these abhorrent views, there is room for them to express them. That's America. But you cannot regulate content of what they can't say. That really, there is limits to that. For example, you can't say fire in a movie theater, because that can lead to imminent harm. That can lead to, that's when you are, you can cause harm to people. So if your words are threatening, which leads to imminent harm, that's speech that can be regulated. But if you label a word and say, hey, if you say donuts from now on, that's hate speech to me, because I'm trying to lose weight now. If you say that and you call me that I'm eating, that's hate speech. That's going to be tested before the courts, and it's not going to fly. So that's something that's going to be playing out in the courts. Whatever law is being passed, it does not necessarily mean it's good law. You're hearing a lot of the Trump executive orders are being set aside, or they're being nullified or whatever, because this is where Congress gave, founding fathers gave each branch equal power. Not one branch is greater than others. So the courts are just as powerful as the legislatures as well. So that's the beauty about our system here. And everybody here that's watching should be comforted with that. It's not a one-man show here. We have three systems in place here that are checking each other, which is a wonderful thing. It's a great experiment by the founding fathers.
And I think if I could just add, like, I think just to be clear, right, people cannot be targeted for prosecution because of their speech. And so what we've seen happen on Tufts campus, what we've seen happen to Mahmoud Khalil, that is an unlawful targeting of people because of the speech in which they engaged. And so like that, I think, is a very, very clear line. I mean, I'm sure we've all been watching closely the cases that have been filed by the ACLU and the Center for Constitutional Rights, and clear challenging those actions.
Thank you. And on the note of speech, this one has been coming up quite often. Outside of protests, what are some of the things we need to be aware of if we speak on Palestine or politics in general via social media, WhatsApp, all the different things through our work or in personal?
I mean, threatening words do not, that can invite attention, and you could be crossing the line there, because someone else may perceive that as threatening to them. So, revolution, words like that, it's freedom of speech. There's no question, but if you're just if your speech is centered on no justice, no peace, I mean, these are regular words here. You're saying no peace, but you mean it in a, you're involved in good trouble. You're not engaging in bad trouble. So that's the distinction here, is protesting in an area where it's permissible, and the words that you say are not fighting words or inciting words that can promote violence. I'm going to beat you up if you come here. Stuff like that can be viewed in a way that's not protected speech. So I think these, in my judgment, these two things are really important and then you know to be protected.
I think the one thing I would add is, look, we are living in unprecedented times where people are clearly being targeted for their speech in public. And I would just, I think you have to, this is a little soft, but like, I think you have to assess because the way that we've seen the government react, particularly the federal government, react to people based on their speech, I think you have to assess your own comfort level in terms of what you want to say, where you want to say it. And so I would encourage you to just check in with yourself because Shereef is absolutely right. You have the right to speak, but you know, do just be aware of sort of what's happening in the environment around you, where you're speaking and what type of exposure that might create for you.
Thank you. And before I switch gears into some similar questions and on the topic of students and universities, can students be expelled or disciplined by the university solely based on police involvement, even without formal charges?
Well, if you know, the university has policies, internal policies. So, you know, there's a certain code of conduct that students are to follow. And, you know, if they violate that code of conduct, including not following law enforcement orders, you know, that could be grounds for a possible dismissal. But again, you got to view the context here. If the student is protesting in a permissible place and the student is not doing anything, not committing any crime, and then the student is being told to exit, and then the student continues to protest and then does exit, and then charges are brought to dismiss, that could invite a First Amendment constitutional claim, because the university is a state actor, and if the police officers are state employees and they are retaliating because the person is protesting, so that could be. So again, it's a fact by fact basis. The student would be protected, especially, and no question that the student would be protected and have a claim, a First Amendment claim, if they did abide by with all the orders, did do as told, and they're still being the university is still trying to dismiss them. That's a really good factual circumstance for a First Amendment case.
Another question we have, and this is a little bit more specific to the raids that happened yesterday, just to clear up, because I think seems new to a lot of us, is it typical for the Attorney General's office to be involved in a protest-related charge at a university level?
I honestly don't know that I have the information to answer that. We have attorneys general's office across the entire country. And just like any branch of government, there are checks and balances. You know, they sort of operate intentionally. The reason I said checks and balances, they operate intentionally independently of the executive branch and the judicial branch. And so attorneys general get involved. They are what I think of as sort of like the state's prosecutor, right? And so they get involved they prosecute a number of cases and different types of cases. And so I think it would really just depend on the sort of circumstances of what happened. So I think that's a hard question to speculate about.
From my experience, the Attorney General is the highest law enforcement official in the state of Michigan. And normally they run on a platform that they're going to combat the worst of the worst, the felons, the drug traffickers, the drug smugglers, sex traffickers. And when they do engage in a raid, you do see a media blitz, and it's on their website, and they got the bad guy, the worst of the worst. When I saw what happened with these students at University of Michigan, who at most, or most of them committed misdemeanors, and basically to be treated like they were the worst of the worst, being plastered everywhere, their names everywhere, they're on the website being treated like they're basically, they're basically equating students who are voicing their opinion, protesting, exercising their freedom of speech, engaging in a cause greater than themselves. They're equating that act from the optics view, if the citizens are looking, they're equating that act of students who are engaging in conduct that's greater than themselves for the good. They're equating that act, the office, with the drug traffickers or the smugglers. That's by treating this as it's like a bust the same way, by putting their names out there, by plastering them on the website. And many of them were engaged in misdemeanors, not even felonies. So that was to me was an overreach, and it really could cause a chilling effect for students in the future, and that's a concern, a great concern. And there's another thing too regarding this that was kind of disturbing. My understanding was that the local police office passed on that, did not even want to prosecute the students at U of M. So that was I think it was an overreach, and it could have been dealt in a different way. It could have addressed the situation if a criminal act did occur, but it could have been the crime. The matter could have been dealt much different than this aggressive overreach.
Thank you. Just to switch gears on, some other questions in relation to safety and how we should protect ourselves. We have a question here about airport travel. Is our tech at risk of being searched while traveling? If so, what should we do to protect ourselves and our data? And if we are asked to give a phone or a laptop or tech, how should we respond?
So that's a great question. As I just mentioned, we saw just a couple weeks ago an attorney who was stopped at the airport returning from an international trip, who is a U.S. citizen, entering and stopped. I dropped in the chat that I think everybody can access these really excellent resources on airport enforcement from the ACLU. So I'd encourage you to take a look at those. I will say, this is the answer to this question is sort of complicated. When you are crossing an international border, so you're coming back into the United States from international travel, customs, it is typical, right, for customs to stop people at the border to determine whether they're admissible to the United States. They can search people's belongings for contraband, and this is completely true, regardless of whether there's anything suspicious about you or your luggage. What the government can't do is target you or select you for secondary inspection based on your religion, your race, your national origin, your gender, your ethnicity, or your political beliefs. These are things that you should know. You should sort of equip yourself when you are traveling. I am again going to give a little bit of a soft answer here, which is you should think about, especially if you're traveling internationally, what the types of speech you've engaged in. Look, we are living in unprecedented times, and so I would think about how, if you think that you may be at risk for targeting, I am not suggesting there's anything legal about the targeting, but do some thinking ahead of time about whether you carry your phone, whether you carry your computer, and think about whether there are steps you can take to sort of mitigate your own personal risk. You certainly kind of consult with an attorney ahead of traveling outside of the country. And so, just in short, there's nothing unlawful about Border Patrol stopping people as they're re-entering the country to do sort of just a search around contraband to ensure that people are admissible. What they can't do is target you based on protected status or political speech. And I think that's really an important thing to remember.
Thank you. And on that same note, for our houses of worship, mosques, churches, if someone shows up, whether it's from police enforcement or law enforcement or the FBI, what steps can our houses of worship or organizations take before do we have to let them in? Do we have rights to stop them at the door? Yeah, so.
Well, back September 11, we all thought that just let everybody in and give them coffee and we'll make good with them and let the FBI agent come into our house and things will be good. And there was a lot of lessons to be learned that that's not the case. That if there is a warrant, if there is going to be an announcement by the FBI, you don't have to let them in. If there is a search warrant, you can look at the search warrant. You can ask for the search warrant before you let them in. So this is your right. This is an American right. You're not being me. You're saying, oh, if I don't, there is this concern in the community that if I don't cooperate, and it comes from the countries they come of origin, where there's a lot of dictatorship regimes, and so you don't want to cross an officer, and if you do, you might be whisked away at night. So that concern is brought here, and that's not the case here. That if you actually say, do you have a warrant, you're actually telling the FBI agent, oh, he knows his rights, and there's that respect there. So. And obviously, you have the right to ask to get an attorney to converse with them and going forward. Look, I'll cooperate with you, or I'll get, or maybe but I want my attorney with me. That's a very nice balanced approach. That you will co-op. That if there's information they need, maybe, but I need my attorney, and then we can get back with you. So, these are a couple of things just to be mindful of.
And since we discussed that, Loren, are there any hotlines that ACLU has, or if anyone has any questions or students have any questions that they can reach out to? You're on mute. Loren, I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so you can always reach out to ACLU of Michigan. The easiest way to do that is to go to our website, which is www.aclumich.org. And there's a menu where you can just submit a complaint, and we have an intake process. I would just note that there are a number of organizations that have hotlines. I know ADC has a hotline. I know Pal Legal has a hotline. And so I would just encourage folks to make themselves aware. And Sumaya or Netta, wherever it's appropriate, I'm happy to sort of share those compiled hotlines. NILC also has a hotline. So that folks can reach out where it's appropriate. But certainly if you feel that your rights were violated, if you feel like you're being targeted for speech, if you feel like you are being targeted because of your immigration status, the ACLU, you can absolutely reach out to the ACLU.
I'm going to end with two last questions here, and you can keep your answers short because I know we're running out of time here. But for our ally communities or community members who feel like they want to do more, what can we do as a community to protect our students' rights and to protect Palestinian rights while they are being attacked physically and legally?
One thing I wanted to mention, I'm going to say it quickly about the immigration issues, is that, and then we made progress in September 11, is that a Border Patrol cannot ask you about your religion or how you practice your religion or your political views. So keep that in mind. That's just that's an infringement on freedom of speech. So if that happens, they're violating the law. You know, Look, the founding fathers gave us a wonderful gift, and I keep saying that it's the most wonderful. It's a democratic experiment, but it's only as good as if we can enforce their vision. Otherwise, if we sit idle of what's happening, rights will be infringed, including the students' rights. Students need to be guided on what's permissible and what's not permissible, what they can do and what they can't do. Armed with that knowledge, they should be able to freely exercise their right to speak and protest without any fear of repercussion. And we have to, as lawyers, all of us, me, Loren, ACLU, other lawyers, we took that oath to do that. The state bar or the American bar, they passed a memo recently expressing alarm of constitutional rights being threatened. Judges are expressing concern of intimidation and that their independence is being possibly. So we all have to stand tall, armed with the Constitution. I'm not saying break the law or anything like that at all. That's not. I'm saying we enforce the law and how it was supposed to be applied. According to the vision of the founding fathers.
We are facing unprecedented attacks on our most fundamental rights. That is just without question, and they are happening every day, multiple times a day. I think a couple of things that I would encourage people to do. One is really understand what your rights are, whether we are talking about travel, whether we are talking about just generally understanding, like, look, ICE is not just approaching, ICE has no idea what people's immigration status is sometimes when they approach them. They're approaching people because of the way that they appear to them. And so, and make sure you understand what your rights are if you are approached by ICE, if you are approached by CBP, if you're approached by DHS. Make sure that your school their obligations to protect people who are non-citizens. Arm yourselves with the Constitution but absolutely, but also with information to understand how you utilize the Constitution to protect yourself and who you should call if you feel like your rights would have been violated. And then I will say two more things. I think sometimes thank you, Sumaya, we should call our elected leaders, regardless of their partisan status, we should be calling them every single day. I do not care if they are your state elected leaders or your federal elected leaders. And we should be telling them that what is happening in this country and what is happening to the people of Michigan under these executive orders is absolutely unacceptable. And we should be doing that all the time, and that we should be voting. And for those of us who really are willing to do it, we should be running for those positions. And so, that's what I would tell you that you can do and should do. And I hope that these Know Your Rights materials are helpful as you sort of navigate this country right now.
Thank you. Once again, for everyone on this call, I called Attorney Shereef and Attorney Loren up, and literally last minute, and they did not hesitate to come join the community and update and be here for our community. So thank you both. You have been a constant rock for us throughout the years. We'll continue to rely on you all for the expert information. We also are grateful for other partner organizations like CARE Michigan, the ADC, and so many others who work really hard to protect and defend the rights of our communities. Here at Emgage, we know sometimes it takes some time to gather the information, get it out to the community. We're always going to do better. If there's anything else that we can do to support and help anything that's happening on the ground, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We'll drop in the chat box our executive director's email that you can reach out to, and we look forward to continuing conversations like this. Well, not look forward to it, but we look forward to keeping the community updated as soon as things are happening in the community. And so thank you all, and we'll talk soon. Assalamu alaikum.